Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a las terceras jornadas de Medicina Homeopática preparadas por AHTAEX y gracias al Ayuntamiento de Plasencia por cedernos este complejo cultural de Las Claras. Actualmente estamos en Plasencia, pero estas jornadas serán grabadas y están siendo retransmitidas en directo y serán grabadas para subirlo a nuestro canal de YouTube y nuestra página web www.ahtaex.com. Estas jornadas están teniendo lugar el 21 y 22 de junio de 2024 y bueno, a continuación quiero pasar a prepararos, ¿no? O enseñaros un poquito el programa, que ya lo hemos ido publicando estos días, pero quiero pasar a mencionaros un poquito lo que se va a preparar durante el fin de semana. Hoy viernes, en este momento, a continuación de esta presentación, haremos la proyección de la película del documental Just One Drop con una entrada gratuita hasta completar el aforo. Como sabéis, todas las jornadas son gratuitas. A continuación podremos tener un ratito de coloquio, de responder preguntas, tanto aquí que se hagan como lo que hagáis por el chat, hasta las 9:30 tenemos disponible. 9. ¿A las 9? Sí. Ah, vale, perfecto. A las 9:30 comienza una visita guiada por Plasencia, donada por una socia de la Junta de AHTAEX. Muy bien. Para mañana, sábado, es cuando tenemos como el peso, ¿no? El plato fuerte de las jornadas, que comenzaremos a las 10 con Homeopatía y Salud Humana, de la doctora Carmen González Sinde, que viene desde Valencia, está aquí ahora mismo con nosotros. Es médico de familia, miembro de la Asociación de la Sociedad Hahnemanniana Matritense y autora de una serie de vídeos que podéis ver en YouTube, 6 mitos de la homeopatía. A continuación de la ponencia de la doctora Carmen, tendremos la ponencia de la doctora Coral Mateos, que será Homeopatía y Salud Animal.
La ha cambiado.
¿Qué han cambiado?
Han cambiado, sí.
De acuerdo, me están diciendo como que hay un cambio de última hora, sí, en el que a continuación de Carmen, de la doctora Carmen, o sea, es decir, a las 10:45 tendremos la ponencia de la doctora Niurka Meneses, que está desde Suiza. No ha podido venir, pero se va a conectar online, lo vamos a ver tanto aquí en presencial como las personas que estáis conectadas desde casa lo vais a poder ver. Su ponencia será sobre homeopatía y salud vegetal. Es licenciada en física, investigadora de agrohomeopatía, autora de los libros Agrohomeopatía, una alternativa para la agricultura ecológica y Agrohomeopatía, que recupera la salud de tus plantas y la tuya. A continuación haremos un parón de lo que son las jornadas, bien para que quien quiera se pueda ir a tomar un café, unas cañas, lo que cada uno quiera, porque tendremos un ratito para los asociados, donde vamos a hacer 2 asambleas, la asamblea ordinaria y la asamblea extraordinaria. Es muy importante, por favor, que todos los socios acudan a esta asamblea, que tenemos muchos temas que tratar, y que también toda aquella persona que esté interesada en asociarse o formar parte de la asociación o colaborar de algún modo, pues están invitados también a que puedan como participar de algún modo a propuestas, ¿no?
Necesitamos.
necesitamos, eso es.
No es quien quiera, necesitamos.
A continuación de esas asambleas continuaremos con las jornadas y en este caso, como hemos dicho, hemos cambiado la ponencia 2 por la ponencia 3. Ahí entraría la doctora Coral Mateos desde Gijón con Homeopatía y Salud Animal. Y en este caso, la doctora Coral Mateos no ha podido venir tampoco de última hora, con lo cual también se conectará de manera remota y podremos verla a través de la pantalla, gracias a las tecnologías. La doctora Coral Mateos es licenciada en veterinaria, presidenta de la Sociedad Española de Homeopatía Veterinaria, autora del libro Homeopatía Veterinaria y en materia médica y casos clínicos comentados. Como veis, tenemos un cartel bastante llamativo, importante y muy variado, o sea, humana, animal y vegetal. Yo creo que cubrimos bastante campo. A continuación de todo esto habrá un pequeño ratito de ruegos y preguntas y para poder hacer una buena convivencia y cerrar estas jornadas de la manera que se merece, hemos preparado una comida a las 2 Las reservas ya están cerradas, os hemos ido como comentando durante estas semanas quién quería, cómo quería participar, pero bueno, si hubiera en algún momento algún voluntario que quiera añadirse, siempre podemos ese ratito de quedarnos a hablar o hacer una convivencia de otra manera. Y con esto estas serían las terceras jornadas de Medicina Homeopática por AHTAEX. Paso la palabra al vicepresidente de la Liga Homeopática Internacional, José Luis Jiménez.
Por España. Buenas tardes a todos. Es un placer teneros aquí reunidos. El placer sería mucho más grande si estuviera el doble de gente, porque tenéis que tener en cuenta que hacer unas jornadas de este tipo, de esta calidad y de esta importancia, nos supone mucho trabajo, que llevamos 3-4 personas, y bueno, y por otro lado hay que agradecerle a los ponentes que vienen de manera desinteresada, como mínimo con una atención adecuada, ¿no? Dicho esto, os paso a reseñar que coincidiendo en el mes de octubre, a primeros de octubre, con el centenario de creación de la Liga a nivel internacional, fue una propuesta hecha en Barcelona en el año 1924, decidieron fundar la Liga y entonces se va a cumplir los 100 años de la propuesta. Esto ha sido motivo para que la propia Liga nos otorgara el derecho a organizar el Congreso. El Congreso de la Liga se organiza todos los años y cada año lo otorga a un país según los privilegios y preferencias que tiene. En nuestro caso ha sido por el centenario y estamos muy orgullosos de ello. De tal manera que del 2 al 5 de octubre estaremos con el mayor Congreso Mundial de Homeopatía que se va a producir en el año en todo el mundo. Vendrán conferenciantes de una altísima talla, vendrán científicos de una altísima talla, tenemos mesas redondas muy importantes, estamos comprometiendo a la OMS y sus representantes para que vengan a debatir la integración de las medicinas tradicionales dentro del sistema de salud, estamos comprometiendo a los distintos entes que colaboraron en su día con la homeopatía, dando cursos y dictando cursos como universidades, colegios y profesionales, les estamos invitando a formar parte de un comité de honor, agradeciéndole el tiempo que han dispensado cuando han podido hacerlo. Ahora no pueden, tienen el veto echado. Entonces, bueno, deciros que en este intento de formar un comité ejecutivo nos ha respondido positivamente el Hospital Sant Déu de Barcelona, que vendrá como comité invitado. Tenemos al Consejo de Farmacéuticos de España, en principio de palabra. Tenemos al Colegio de Valencia, desde el año pasado comprometido, al Colegio de Madrid. Es decir, tenemos una serie de entidades que van a hacer que tenga un determinado comité de honor válido y que tendrá repercusión en las redes sociales. La jornada se va a desarrollar desde el 2, como he dicho, por la tarde a las 4 de la tarde hasta el sábado a las 2 del mediodía. El primer día, que es el que están invitados los comités internacionales, están invitados a participar de manera gratuita para abrir el Congreso. Luego ya el 3, 4 y 5 deberán inscribirse en el Congreso para poder participar. Aparte de esta participación, tenemos una muy importante, que es la de la Plataforma Europea de Asociaciones de Pacientes, que vendrán a participar plenamente de las reuniones, y asimismo las asociaciones de pacientes de homeopatía y usuarios de homeopatía de España, que también tendrán un calendario que hacer. Obviamente tendremos actividades conjuntas y actividades paralelas. Creo que va a ser un éxito, creo que todo el mundo va a salir contento del Congreso, creo que este Congreso va a ser un vuelco enorme a nivel de la sociedad, desbaratando el sentimiento de escepticismo que intentan compensar desde hace ya años a la homeopatía. Y bueno, pues solo deciros que estáis invitados todos y que vengáis a vernos, que será estupendo. Gracias. Bueno, y ahora ya vamos a dar comienzo a la sesión de esta tarde, que se trata de una proyección de una película documental francesa traducida al español. Vamos a intentar verla si la podéis seguir traduciendo y si no podéis me lo decís y la vamos leyendo, ¿de acuerdo?
Sí, pues damos comienzo a ello.
Do you know what homeopathy is?
I have no idea.
Homeopathy? Nah, I never heard of it.
I don't. It's eating healthy, it's taking herbs and vitamins.
Homeopathy, yeah, of course.
What is it?
Yeah, that is that you touch your body on a weird manner.
Homeopathy is when you dilute water down incredibly much, and then people claim that it is a medicine.
I'm a big fan of homeopathy. It's really saved my life. It stopped me being very depressed. It's put me back on course.
It's a bogus form of medicine.
And, well, scientifically proven not to do that much.
Homeopathy, a system of medicine that's often dismissed today as quackery. Yet once it rivaled and revolutionized the practice of medicine.
I'm giving her arnica.
And it is still used by millions worldwide. Patients swear by it.
The modern healthcare system with drugs is more of a disease management system. It's not a healthcare system. It's not giving health to people. It's managing their disease. And yes, it will prolong life, but the quality of life is that we're on drugs. So if the goal is to have everybody on drugs, there's something wrong with that thinking.
Homeopathy takes a different approach. It uses highly diluted remedies that stimulate the body to heal itself. It treats the whole person, not just the disease. Critics think homeopathy is completely implausible. Not that we don't know how it works, but that we don't know even how it might work. They fear practitioners are charlatans and patients are being fooled.
They have people's lives in their hands. If you make an extraordinary claim, you have to have evidence to back that claim up. And the facts are, the homeopathic community has not provided that evidence.
There's hundreds of thousands of doctors around the world doing this. There are 200 million people using it. Are they all mad?
This is the story of the most controversial system of medicine ever invented. Homeopathy.
Oh, hello and welcome. So come and see the wild things of homeopathy. Lots of what I've got here has been given to me by people who've retired, or it belonged to their grandfather, and so on. This was one of my earliest finds. A really, really small travelling kit for homeopathic medicines. Here's a little book called The Medical Telephone, a homeopathic pharmacy in Hobart, Tasmania. Here is the Samuel Hahnemann Monument in Washington, D.C., a doctor who, in his own lifetime, created a system of medicine which has endured and lasted.
In the late 18th century in Leipzig, Germany, Dr. Hahnemann had a reputation as a brilliant scientist.
Samuel Hahnemann was a doctor in Germany who was disaffected with conventional medicine.
À la fin du 18e siècle, en fait, la médecine est très barbare. On n'imagine pas comment elle est barbare. C'est des saignées à n'en plus finir, c'est de l'emploi de doses massives d'arsenic, de mercure. En fait, on rend les gens plus malades qu'ils ne le sont quand ils sont malades.
At the end of the 18th century, doctors were using toxic plants of all kinds mixed up together according to their ideas. And Hahnemann found this totally drastic. He was very intent on helping people, not killing people.
Dr. Hahnemann smoked his pipe from morning till night, deeply absorbed in thought.
The thought of becoming a murderer towards the life of my fellow human beings was terrible to me.
He gave up practicing medicine and used his literary skills to support his large family.
In time, serious illnesses endangered the lives of my children, my flesh and blood, and there was no means on which I could rely for affording them relief.
Hahnemann felt sure that God must have ordained a method for healing the sick, and he was determined to find it. In 1790, when Hahnemann was translating a medical textbook, something caught his attention. The text stated that quinine, a remedy made from Peruvian bark, cures malarial fever because it is bitter.
Hahnemann had a great knowledge of various types of herbs during that period, and he knew that there were many other things which were bitter and astringent. That wouldn't be a good argument for why it would be effective in the treatment of malaria.
So he said, I've got to look into this.
As an experiment, Hahnemann ingested quinine over several days to see what would happen.
My feet, fingers, hands first became cold. My heart began to palpitate. I discontinued it and was in good health.
Eureka! This was the moment in the history of science much overlooked. Malaria could be cured by quinine because it causes something like it.
Hahnemann concluded, if a substance is capable of causing harm, it is also capable of curing. This principle of let like, treat like became the cornerstone of his new system of medicine.
This is basically like a vaccine. You give a small quantity of what makes the person sick, and the body reacts and heals itself.
Inspired by his experiment with quinine, he continued to do what he called provings or testings on himself and his family, using a variety of substances that he found in pharmacies and in nature. Dr. Hahnemann meticulously documented his findings. When the toxicity of the remedies produced unwanted side effects, Dr. Hahnemann began watering them down and vigorously shaking them. To his surprise, this combination of diluting and shaking made the remedies more effective. Hahnemann named his new system of medicine homeopathy. He called conventional medicine allopathy. His colleagues ridiculed his findings, which didn't make any sense to them. Dr. Hahnemann was convinced he had found a way to relieve the suffering of humanity. Modern medicine has come a long way since the 1800s, yet there are still many diseases for which conventional medicine has few cures. Homeopathy is used to treat a wide variety of illnesses, from simple colds and coughs to serious chronic conditions.
Okay, Jenny, nice to meet you. Come in. What else?
Most people find themselves in a homeopath's office when conventional medicine has failed them.
At the age of 13, I came down with Lyme disease. The remedies that she gave me ultimately gave me my life back.
I went to see this amazing woman who asked me an hour and a half or 2 hours worth of ridiculous questions. She then went into a cupboard and did something and came out and gave me a couple of pills. And I essentially have never had hay fever again.
My career was going to come to a halt at some point. It was really painful. I could barely, the stiffness when you're a musician is not really good for the, on the hands. I consulted a rheumatologist and they said there's not much we can do for you, unfortunately. I went to see a homeopath doctor and it took a little bit of time. It eventually disappeared completely.
second, please.
I'm a cinematographer. I was on a shoot in an apple orchard. I went to remove a vine out of the shot, and it might have pricked my finger. That night, I felt something under the skin. It turned into an angry red infection. I went into a walk-in clinic and took oral antibiotics that the doctor prescribed for me, and by 3 days later, it just wasn't getting better.
This is Dr. Vitale. I know you have an abscess on your finger, which you sent some labs off on, and it shows that the bacteria that you have is not sensitive to the antibiotics we've been giving you. So I hope you're checking your message. You should come to the ER as soon as possible.
They had cultured it. They found out it was MRSA. And when I talked to the doctor, I was like, well, what is that? It kind of rang a bell.
MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, is also called the superbug because it cannot be cured with use of antibiotics. Mark was put in isolation because MRSA is highly infectious. His doctors treated him with powerful antibiotics.
I think another day or so of the IV vancomycin.
I figured it was behind me. About a month later, I felt something on the back of my leg, and I thought maybe it's the return of the MRSA.
Mark calls me one evening saying, I have MRSA, can you do something about it? It's a very strong bug, and that bug will kill you. I said, go to the hospital, at least to get it cleansed. And he said, if I go to the hospital, they will keep me.
Pierre had to change the dosages, tried a few different remedies until he found the right one.
Knowing how lethal this is, there's one night where I really could not sleep at all.
I was concerned for my life, but at the same time, I was confident that I would actually be worse shape if I went back to the hospital. I kept checking my fever. It was maybe low grade, but it wasn't out of control. And I got through it. It started to heal.
You're going to hear very impressive stories about people being treated with life-threatening infections with homeopathic remedies. You can think about it in two ways. From one perspective, you could say, yeah, there's lots of other things that could have been going on. We don't know for sure that the diagnosis was correct. No, diagnostic tests are not 100%. You also don't know what would have happened had that individual treatment not been given. We have immune systems. We can fight off infections. It happens.
Within 6 to 7 days, we were out of the woods.
Hey, Mark, just looking at your picture here. Very good. It's great. It's a big improvement.
We have culture before and culture after. There is no MRSA, period.
Homeopathy, how does it work? We don't know. A homeopathic medicine does not heal per se. It doesn't cure you. It doesn't cure your symptoms. It acts as a catalyst for healing.
I really don't understand why they're keeping asking me that. Because if you talk with the conventional doctor, he doesn't know how an allopathic remedy does work.
I was in medical school. With the typical arrogance of all medical students, I knew what could be cured and what couldn't. And I received this magazine, and in it, there happened to be an article about all the amazing cures with homeopathy. I thought it was a bunch of baloney. I tossed the magazine away. And then in the middle of the night, for reasons I have no idea, I sat straight up and thought, what if that were true? It's only after you see it happening in person after person after person that you start to realize the power of homeopathy to change lives, not just to change symptoms.
When we catch a cold, when we get flu, when we cut ourselves, we heal. It's the natural state of our body is to heal and repair. And when people get chronic illness, whether it's arthritis, whether it's asthma, somehow that healing power has been turned off. The body cannot get back its balance, its equilibrium, and heal itself. And what homeopathy does is it provides the impetus for the body to heal itself. So in a sense, it's not the homeopathy that's doing the work. The homeopathy provides the impetus for the body to do its own work.
I specifically remember the doctor telling us, there are 10 toes, 10 fingers, everything looks good, developing perfect. In retrospect, I realized, 10 fingers and 10 toes, give me the 9 fingers.
I don't think anybody could have been happier than I was to be pregnant.
Hi, honey.
Hello.
This is a video diary about pregnancy. This is you at 6 months.
Hold on, let's turn to the side so we can get a view.
I'll pull this up so you can
Look at that. Mommy looks like an Oompa Loompa.
Okay, Lucas, this is where you are today. The big belly, there's a little boy in there.
Got 5 more weeks to go. What time did this start? 9?
It started probably
water broke?
about 9:30. No, actually it started right about 10 after 9 because we were watching The Apprentice. Diamonds. I'm going to get you big diamonds in platinum. Lucas Jacob Korn, 6 pounds, 7 ounces, born exactly, I don't know, what was the time? I'm still putting you in. We kept saying to ourselves, are we prepared to have this kid? Is this really ours? Are people actually letting us leave with him?
We're tired parents, but just thrilled.
Oh my God.
He sat on time, he crawled on time, he rolled over on time, he had eye contact.
Lucas. Hey, hi.
He was pretty normal at that time, pretty typical. And then maybe a few months later, it was 3-4 months, and we were like, he's really not starting to sleep yet.
Around 12 months, we started to have some real concerns.
His eye contact just stopped. He didn't have any. He didn't look at us. He didn't answer to his name.
Lucas. You're staring into space.
I knew he had autism. When Lucas was diagnosed that day, I felt like everything in life had slipped away in one moment.
It was as if someone had just told us, okay, I'm pulling the floor out from underneath you. You're going to fall down to the basement. But here's a sticky pad with the name of a speech therapist. And that's going to make it okay. And I remember taking the number. And I was like, is there anything else we should do? Who do we talk to?
I researched every day, every night, every minute of the day. And I found different things that I thought could help my son.
You do.
Everything helped a little bit. He was still autistic, and he still had very abnormal behaviors. I was starting to give up hope at that time. He's almost 5 years old, he's not talking. They tell you if they don't talk by 5, 6, forget it, they're never gonna talk. He's never gonna be able to talk. He's not gonna be able to take care of himself. He's never gonna have eye contact. My son is never gonna look at me. He's never gonna know how much I love him. He's never gonna know how much I love him. That was the loss that I felt, and it was extreme. I especially had a bad day. I prayed that night. I was just crying and got down on my knees and prayed to God to help me find the way, any way, to help my son. I got on the internet the next day, and I found Dr. Luke.
When people come to me with their children, they have tried about everything you can mention that is at this point in vogue for the treatment of autism spectrum disorder. When you have tried all this, you would have posed yourself the question, why would I even try homeopathy? Because, first of all, homeopathy is based on a totally different premise. We really take into account the whole mental, emotional, physical picture. So it's the individualistic approach that is a big plus point for homeopathy.
He just listened, and he just let me tell him everything that happened. And then he said, oh, I have a remedy to begin. It was very surreal. Like, even making a remedy, there's nothing in it. It's like a tiny little Saclac pill, and you put it in, it's really small, like the size of a poppy seed. And you put it in water, and then you take one drop from that, and you put it in another thing of water, and then you take one drop of water, and you put it on Lucas's tongue. When I first started doing it, I was really like, how could this could possibly not, I couldn't believe. It would be very hard to believe that if somebody just saw it. Tongue out. I saw a change from the first time I gave him remedy. As soon as I gave it to him, his eye contact came back. Good looking. Lucas, give me the ball. Thank you! I saw it right away. And I was like, let me second guess. Like, I started to second guess myself. Like, well, maybe it was something else. Or maybe it's just a fluke. He got better for a few days. He seems a little bit better today. He's a little bit more related, his eye contact. But, he's not cured, so I'll just keep going, and we'll see if this really is something.
Try again.
Homeopathy, it doesn't have any plausibility. It's basically nothing. It's been diluted out of existence to the point where there's no active ingredient left. Not a small dose, no dose.
Most of the pharmaceutical agents that we know work, we know why they work. We know that they do get absorbed through the gut. We know that they're carried by the bloodstream to a particular receptor on a cell. So we know the mechanism. I think the reason that many scientists are skeptical about homeopathy is we don't know the mechanism. It seems just like magic.
For over 200 years, scientists have debated how homeopathy could possibly work. The main reason why homeopathy is so controversial is because of the preparation of the remedies. These remedies have been made all over the world, according to Hahnemann's direction, over 200 years ago.
In a nutshell, you're taking a raw material, whether it's a plant, a mineral, or even sometimes an animal, and you start off by making an extract of that, and then there's a process of diluting it in a substance, alcohol and water. And the succussion part, the noise you can hear is the shaking with an impact. Well, succussion is a word that does have some history, and it just means shaking but with a bang.
Succussion is essential to activate the medicine. Many homeopathic remedies are diluted to the point where there is not even a single molecule left of the original substance. Just one drop of this solution is put into a bottle of sugar pills, creating the remedy.
Homeopathy must be quite the daftest form of alternative medicine that exists. I'm really quite surprised that anyone thinks it's worth talking about, for the very simple reason that there's nothing in the tablets. That's a consequence of Avogadro's number.
Amadeo Avogadro was a contemporary of Hahnemann who figured out at what point in dilution you would have less than a molecule, and the mathematics worked out to 10 to the minus 23.
To give you an idea of Avogadro's number, if you were to put one drop in the ocean, stir the oceans of the earth, and take one drop back, that would be a dilution equivalent to Avogadro's number. So If you dilute a substance long enough, if you have high enough dilutions, you will not have a single molecule left of your original substance. So in a way, how can you expect any effect from a substance that is so diluted that there's not a single atom left of the original substance?
These stunt people decided to call themselves 1023 and stand outside certain pharmacies and take a bottle of homeopathic medicine to prove there's nothing in it.
Skeptics from across 30 countries took part in what they called a mass homeopathic overdose demonstration to protest the sale of homeopathic remedies.
So, it is now 10:23.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Homeopathy, there's nothing in it.
One can't overdose on a bottle of homeopathic medicine. One pill or one bottle of pills is still one dose, and if it's not the right remedy, it won't work for you at all.
They don't taste as good as Smarties, but they're sweet nevertheless.
Mine tastes like chalk.
Down the hatch, you're gone.
The skeptics movement is devoted to debunking homeopathy. Its favorite platform is the internet.
Hello, I'm James Randi, and I'm here to help celebrate World Homeopathy Awareness Week. The acronym for that is WA, a week during which the practitioners of and believers in the delusion known as homeopathy wish to draw our attention to that variety of quackery.
The royal family have always used homeopathy and have made no secret of the fact that they have used homeopathy.
Long live the Queen.
I think that does make people think, crikey, well, it's doing all right for them. And also, if it works for them, it might work for me.
The fact that the royal family uses homeopathy, and indeed the Prince of Wales advocates an integrated approach to medicine, of course that is a plus. But actually what drives it is that people find that it works for them. That is what makes it survive.
In the United Kingdom, homeopathy has been an integral part of the National Health Service, the NHS, for over half a century.
I've personally always been a very good supporter of homeopathy, and I use the remedies, and I keep them in my pocket, actually. This is the homeopathic remedy kit, 36 remedies, and I think I save our National Health Service a fortune.
But now, funding for homeopathy in the UK is under threat of being cut.
The controversy here in England has been going on certainly over the last 10 years, but gathering pace, and in the last couple of years it's become really quite vitriolic and vindictive.
Opponents feel consumers need to be warned. They believe homeopathy is purely a placebo effect.
Homeopathy is under huge attack from a very highly organised, well-funded, very good anti-homeopathy lobby. You have to admire them. They know what they're doing, and it's very effective. And I think frequently that if I didn't know what I know about homeopathy, if I didn't know how well it works with my patients, how well it's worked for me, how well I've seen it work in animals, in babies, in children, where I can see that it's not placebo effect, I would believe these people who say it's rubbish.
It would be self-evidently false to say a pill which contains nothing can cure you of anything. It's very simple. I realised that there were 5 British universities that ran Bachelor of Science degrees in homeopathy, which I just could not believe. It's so ludicrous. Something which is so profoundly anti-scientific, I became rather shocked when I retired from full-time science. Blogs became available, so I had a way to use. And indeed, it was very effective. All those degrees are now shut down.
I can understand why skeptics are skeptical. There appears to be a good reason why it can't possibly work, which is that very high dilutions are frequently used. And this does seem very odd, and yet it does work. It wouldn't have hung around for 200 years. It wouldn't be spreading all over the world. It wouldn't be supported actually by quite a lot of research if that were not the truth.
In London, scientists Alex Tournier and Rachel Roberts run the Homeopathy Research Institute, founded to address the need for rigorous scientific investigations into homeopathy.
The debate is raging about whether homeopathy works or not, and the only way to put that debate to rest is to get sufficiently good trials done that there is no argument anymore. We know it works or it doesn't work. We know it works for this or not for that, and we have those answers. Question is...
I consider myself a scientist first and foremost, and I'm curious. I think that's what drove me to science, is curiosity. What happened to me is, through personal health reasons, I had an encounter with homeopathy as a last resort. I had chronic fatigue at the time, and I tried pretty much everything under the sun. And homeopathy was by far one of the least impressive medicines I had encountered. So I was like, not impressed, tried it, and then it went, whoa, something happened, something I didn't expect, something I didn't think could happen. And it made me think, wait a minute, I need to find out a bit more about this because I don't understand this. And this is, for me, the starting point, this I don't understand this, the curiosity, which is at the driving force of the scientific process for me. After having worked 10 years for Cancer Research UK in London, a major cancer research charity, I decided to follow my passion and go for homeopathy research, because I really believe there's something there to discover.
Dr. Alex Tournier.
Alex and Rachel organized a groundbreaking meeting at the House of Commons for members of Parliament, people from the National Health Service, and homeopaths to discuss the need for more research.
Homeopathy is one of the few subjects, the mere mention of which can alter people's perception of you within seconds. Mention the word, and within the briefest of moments, whatever credibility and reputation for objectivity you had will evaporate suddenly. Today, well over 200 million people use homeopathy worldwide. Bearing in mind it was discovered only 200 years ago, the fact that it is so widely used today should make us pause. If homeopathy really is all placebo, then shouldn't we find out why so many people still choose to use it? Homeopathy has been shown to be efficacious in 8 clinical conditions in placebo-controlled trials. If it is just placebo, then how can that be?
In 2010, the Australian government decided to take on this question about the effectiveness of homeopathy. In one of the most ambitious reviews of the evidence to date, the National Health and Medical Research Council, the NHMRC, began by identifying more than 1,800 scientific studies on homeopathy. 5 years later, they released their findings.
The evidence is clear. When homeopathy is tested against placebo or tested against other types of treatments, it doesn't show any benefit, and that is essentially what we've shown.
The world press ran with the story. The fallout was immediate and devastating around the globe. This report posed a serious threat to homeopathy. Jerry Dendrinos worked in the health sector for the Australian government for several years. He suspected this report might not be free from bias, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. Through the Australian Freedom of Information Act, Jerry obtained documents.
Homeopathy is one subject in the biomedical field that generates very polarized views. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but let's see what the evidence says. Let's suspend our judgment.
What we wanted to do was to apply our standard, come to this without any conclusion, look at the evidence, but only look at strong scientific evidence and put the position to the Australian public and allow them to judge for themselves.
Which is a different thing.
as its jury, and we know
In London, Alex and Rachel are working with Jerry to help with his investigation of the Australian report.
I wouldn't mind putting something in the next e-newsletter as a news item saying, jury is doing this, if you want to sign up, you know.
Honestly, I probably wasn't prepared for the extent of the animosity that has been directed against homeopathy. We've seen in the media a lot of attacks, very directed attacks with little knowledge of the facts.
When we looked at the Australian report and you see a document changing attitudes and actually changing access to a medicine, you have to take a long, hard look at that piece of work and check that it is rigorous and check that it's been done properly, because people's lives are being affected by it.
Wonderful. That feels really powerful when you describe what you're doing. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still sort of information gathering, but it's getting clearer, isn't it? I think it's going to start writing.
Slowly taking shape. It is.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Like 2 days ago, we had 2 days ago, really the realization of how much power has gone into hiding the facts.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, think about it. I mean, it's intense. I mean, nobody knows what has happened here.
We took a very good look at the Australian report, all, I think, 600 pages of the documentation that we were given. Because it's our job, day in, day out, at our institute, to know what evidence is out there. They said, we are going to look at all of the existing evidence for, I think it was 61 named diseases. So we thought, interesting, they're going to find the great studies we have on childhood diarrhea. They're going to find the really strong studies on hay fever. So, I picked up the document, went straight to the chapters for those conditions, and they said, we have no reliable evidence it's effective. Immediately alarm bells go off because you're thinking, how did they not find them?
The expert group looked at the entire bunch of evidence, the entire bunch, not selectively picking this. That's a study, forget the rest. Now, of course, there are people, as there are with all our guidelines, there are people who think a different conclusion should have been brought. And if you're a practitioner, whether it's a homeopathy or anything else, surgeon, cardiologist, if the conclusion affects you, of course you're going to be upset, try and find what's the basis of the report. Evidence is the bulk of evidence.
Jerry discovered it was not only those in the homeopathic community who disagreed with this conclusion. The NHMRC sought independent peer review from the Australasian Cochrane Centre, which advised NHMRC that no reliable evidence does not seem an accurate reflection of the body of evidence. A substantial proportion of small but good quality studies show significant differences in favor of homeopathy.
If you think about it, if they allowed even one study to be reported that was positive, in a sense that would be an admission that homeopathy can work.
NHMRC ignored the advice of the independent review and did not disclose this to the Australian community. In the summer of 1799, a deadly outbreak of scarlet fever raged through the village of Königslutter, where Samuel Hahnemann lived. Conventional medicine was failing. Many were dying.
People became very, very red. Red in the face, red in the body, huge fevers. And he says, this resembles this plant that I know, belladonna.
Years earlier, Dr. Hahnemann tested remedies made from belladonna on healthy people and observed their reactions. He felt confident that this would be the right remedy to treat the particular symptoms of scarlet fever.
And he went from house to house with his little vial and put it in water and said, give it not just to the sick children, give it to the other children who are not yet sick. And nobody died anymore. And that was the first time an epidemic of scarlet fever was cured. So it was magnificent. It was the first big cure of homeopathy.
For the next 2 decades, Dr. Hahnemann continued to experiment, successfully treating a variety of illnesses and the testing of 99 remedies. In 1810, Dr. Hahnemann published his first book, The Organon of the Medical Art.
This is a copy of Hahnemann's Organon, a first edition. And it's in remarkable condition.
He explained the philosophy of homeopathy, its practice, and his theory of how the body heals.
The Organon, his textbook, was translated in at least 30 languages. When homeopathy spread, it spread wild and deep. It spread from the eastern seaboard all the way to Chicago and San Francisco. On the eastern seaboard of America, it was the medicine of the intelligentsia. Henry James wrote about it in his novels. Louisa May Alcott wrote about it in her novels. Politicians and presidents and their wives and children used homeopathy.
One of the very exciting moments in the history of medicine was the response to the cholera epidemics around homeopathy. During the 1830s and 40s, cholera first hit American cities and terrified many Americans.
Homeopathy was gaining favor because of its success in treating epidemics. Mainstream press touted its effectiveness in treating scarlet fever, yellow fever, and cholera. Conventional doctors were rapidly losing patients to homeopathy. Some began abandoning their practice for this new system of medicine.
The American Institute of Homeopathy, established in 1844, may have been the first national medical association to be established in America.
What better way of valuing how good homeopathy is, how effective it is, than that there was in existence in New York, and I don't know the dates, but in the 19th century from their costumes, the Homeopathic Mutual Life Insurance Company of New York City lower rates to homeopaths. There was even a homeopathic hospital ambulance service, of which I've got a photograph here.
Partially in response to the popularity of homeopathy, in 1847, the American Medical Association, the AMA, was founded.
The AMA was set up with much the same reasons as the American Institute of Homeopathy. The idea was to imagine a world where American Orthodox physicians were spread from coast to coast and had extraordinary influence over American society.
Homeopaths were banned from becoming members. Later, the AMA established a code of ethics which stated in their charter that Orthodox physicians would be expelled if they even consulted with a homeopath. One Connecticut physician lost his membership when he was under suspicion for consulting with a homeopath, his wife. Despite this, homeopathy thrived.
The peak of American homeopathy was around 1900. There were many homeopathic schools and homeopathic hospitals around the country. A number in Ohio, in Michigan, in San Francisco, in Philadelphia, in New York, in Boston.
By the end of the 19th century, homeopathy had transformed how medicine was practiced. The United States had become one of the world leaders of homeopathy. In 1900, a monument honoring Dr. Hahnemann was erected in Washington, D.C. Many distinguished guests attended the dedication ceremony, including President McKinley.
So that was the peak of homeopathy. And then by the time 1930s and 40s, homeopathy almost disappeared.
The field of medicine was changing rapidly. young medical students were less interested in studying homeopathy.
Homeopathy became seen as, kind of an old-fashioned sort of medicine. The kind of thing that your grandfather might have supported, but that it wasn't a modern 1920s way of looking at the world.
Increasing political and economic factors also contributed to shutting down homeopathic medical schools. Women who had learned homeopathy to treat their families were instrumental in keeping it alive in America.
No drinking.
So far, what we had done had made Lucas get better, little by little, small, incremental improvements.
Let's go.
For us, we have a lot of hope, and we've seen some amazing things. And with those amazing things is going to be Lucas's recovery. It's going to be Lucas's cure. At least that's what we hope for.
And he had never said a word. And he said no. Just one day after that, he just said no. I said something and he said no. With meaning, with contempt, and I was like, what? And I knew that it was a remedy that did that.
No.
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 Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say, I love
You.
love you. Good.
Lucas can read. Lucas is very smart, and I always knew that he was. I always knew that he was brilliant inside. We couldn't see that. We couldn't see those things.
Under the
Side.
there is a
Tree.
tree.
He went from no language to saying no, to singing the alphabet, to singing happy birthday. How can that happen? If he couldn't make it past where he is now, that is something I could live with. I have very high hopes that Lucas will be completely rid of his autism. But if he could only speak these words and relate on this level, I could live with that, because he is my son now. Before he was like my son, but it was like, somebody had taken his soul away. He's here with me now, so however he is fine with me. I love him and I want him with me. But I guess my fear is that, he could go back. I don't want to lose him again.
He's so delicious. He's so delicious.
Lucas, I love you.
I'm Ishita Savant. I'm 14 years old, and I was diagnosed with migraine and borderline epilepsy. After 8 months to 1 year of taking homeopathy medicines, I feel much, much better, like 80% better.
I had arthritis. I was suffering as if I was not able to get up. And since I have started with homeopathy since a year, I had no pain as such.
In India, homeopathy is widely accepted and used side by side conventional medicine.
I believe there are about 200,000 homeopaths in India at the moment. And it's very popular among the people of India. I don't think there's a single Indian person who hasn't heard about homeopathy or who hasn't had some experience with it.
India is a true democracy because existing in parallel with the mainstream modern medicine is homeopathy, being given equal status and respect and recognition by the board, by the government, and by the people.
I come to this clinic every day in the morning at 6 o'clock. Around 75 to 100 patients I see in a day. If you stand, it hurts you.
And body में पूरा rash हो गया, काला काला.
I realize that I need to study something which is natural, something which heals, something which treats the man and not only the disease. I started departments in various private as well as semi-private and government allopathic hospitals. In many other hospitals, I am on call to go and examine the patient and treat those patients. And in some hospitals, I have a department and we have a very nice bonding. They all know me, and so whenever there is a homeopathic patient, the doctor says, okay, this is what I can do for the patient. Now you carry on from this point.
Once a month, Dr. Master travels to a cancer clinic in Pune.
The basic principle in treating any cancer patient is to improve his immune system. If there is a necessity, I encourage the patient to go for chemotherapy, and I tell them, look, if any side effects that will come, I am ready to treat. Let us start from head to foot. At the level of the head, we all know that we get hair loss. You also get sore throat. You get dry cough, nausea. These are all the common side effects of chemotherapy that we come across, and we treat them very successfully.
I would like to make a simple confession. Every day when I go into practice, I start with the idea, this cannot work. It's not possible. Because the homeopathic remedies are so highly ultra diluted, it's as if there is nothing in it anymore. And I say, no, it's placebo, it cannot work. And that's how I actually go into my practice every day. At the end of the practice, after listening to so many grateful patients, I know it works. And how do I know it's not placebo? A 6-month-old baby, a 1-year-old child, a 3-year-old child doesn't even know what it's taking. Does faith cure these children?
After 6 months of investigation into the Australian report, Jerry uncovered layers of misconduct and bias.
People keep quoting this review as being credible and rigorous and thorough and comprehensive, and that's just a lie. They are all lies. It's been a roller coaster. Week by week, as I found things out, I was in a constant state of shock.
One of the flaws Jerry uncovered was that the NHMRC claimed that any trial with fewer than 150 participants was unreliable. Jerry knew that this would disqualify many of the studies. He tracked down one of the advisory committee members. In a Skype call, he asked him some questions.
I'm just really interested in the 150 sample size cutoff. Like, how did you come to that?
Yeah, that was one that caused a lot of debate.
Right.
But anything smaller than that number was really deemed to be statistically insignificant because of the very small effect size.
I was really curious about why they picked 150 out of thin air. And I thought, well, it's interesting the impact of that decision because, for example, there's a really high quality study that's been done on hay fever that had 144 people in it. And in the Australian report, it talks about that study and it says it's high quality, but it had 144 people in it, so it's gone.
I never read anywhere that you needed at least 150 subjects in a study in order for it to be considered valid. So it's just an artificial delineation that they seem to have made.
In Nicaragua in the 1990s, Dr. Jennifer Jacobs conducted a clinical trial of homeopathic treatment of acute diarrhea in children. The results showed homeopathy performed better than placebo. Jacobs' study was published in Pediatrics, a prominent medical journal. Her study had 88 participants.
What standard or publication did you use to authenticate the 150? Because it seems to be completely arbitrary.
The number you're focusing on, the 150, is a straw man. It's a very easy thing to target. The bigger issue is that none of the studies themselves, I mean, we could have drawn it at 70 and you would actually find the same answer. I would suggest, and I'm going to close the interview here if you pursue this, is that that is something to take up with the NHMRC. It is something that, as an advisor to them, we did give advice that could be open for criticism. My personal view is that it might have been a mistake to use that as a criteria, but I can tell you that it would have made no difference to the outcome.
It did make a difference to the outcome. The overview started with over 1,800 studies. Only 176 were suitable for this review. Then they applied their unprecedented definition of trial reliability. The sample size cutoff alone reduced the number of studies to 30. The remaining studies had to pass through another threshold for quality, which was set unusually high. Only 5 studies made it through. According to their rules, only 5 studies were deemed reliable. Since these were all assessed as negative, the NHMRC concluded that there is no reliable evidence that homeopathy is effective. Jerry, Rachel, and Alex realized that if the cutoff criteria had been set lower, most of the studies would have been included and analyzed further, producing a different outcome. Deep into his investigation, Jerry discovered a link between the Advisory Committee and Friends of Science and Medicine, a major skeptics organization who believe alternative medicines, which they call pseudosciences, are putting the health of Australians at risk.
During this review, the chair of the committee was a member of the Friends of Science in Medicine, a group specifically set up to eradicate complementary medicine from the Australian healthcare landscape.
An active Friends of Science and Medicine member, Professor Peter Brooks was appointed as the chair of the Advisory Committee. The NHMRC disclosure form asked if he had an affiliation with any organizations opposed to homeopathy. He checked no. When it was discovered that he had this conflict of interest, Brooks was asked to step down as chair.
It gets even better. And then they kept him as the chair till mid-May.
And didn't he stay on the committee throughout the process?
He stayed on the committee.
As Jerry probed further, he found something deeply troubling. The NHMRC had earlier commissioned a different reviewer to write the report.
The first reviewer they employed was a very reputable reviewer. They actually wrote NHMRC's own guidelines on how to review evidence.
Jerry learned the first reviewer found some positive evidence in favor of homeopathy.
They handed in their final draft report, and then within 72 hours their contract was terminated. They were fired.
I genuinely can't remember any specifics, but I remember that they didn't deliver on the contract. This happens quite a lot. It's not an uncommon event. Yeah.
Jerry tracked down a letter written by a well-respected physician and epidemiologist in Australia who expressed his concern about the termination of the first reviewer. It is very unusual to cancel a contract after all the work has been done and the report submitted. This may indicate some personal agenda or that the outcome of the report was not as expected.
We asked them under Freedom of Information, please show us a copy of the first review. They refused to provide us a copy of the first review, and they've refused to give us details of the methodology for the first review.
It's nothing to do with their methodology. It was some issues about reporting and other things that I believe that the NHMRC themselves had issues with.
The NHMRC never disclosed the existence of that first report. It's as if it never happened. And then they started the review process all over again with a new contractor.
Not only was this a disgraceful waste of taxpayers' money, which they didn't even say how they spent that money, it was nothing short of administrative misconduct and pure scientific fraud.
The controversy over homeopathy will continue until the process by which it works is understood. Dedicated scientists from a range of disciplines are committed to solving this mystery.
At this conference in Rome, scientists from all over the world are presenting their latest findings. And some of the most interesting talks have been around the research that is taking place into the mechanism of action of homeopathic medicines.
There's clinical evidence, but the question that everyone asks is, well, how does it work? And until I think we can start to answer that question, the majority of the world isn't going to accept homeopathy.
I can see clearly that now in all your mind you have more or less the same basic question. Why a professor of agronomy here in a conference of homeopathy? And the reason...
Professor Dinelli presented his experiments with agriculture, using homeopathy in place of toxic herbicides.
And the person that I've analyzed our sample was convinced that that was a chemical treatment on our plant. So I was half convinced about homeopathy, but after this experiment, I have seen the light.
It flies against everything I've learned as a physicist, everything I've studied during my thesis on water structures. I know it's not possible. It is in principle not possible, and yet it's there. It is there. We see it in experiments. And our duty as scientists is to look at the experiments and then find out more and explain it. The anxiety that we might have something to discover, I think, is exciting. And if we have to rewrite part of the science, fantastic. That's what research is all about.
There are times when I wish I'd chosen an easier field of study and an easier career, because every day is a challenge when you're working in an area that is completely controversial. And on those days, I will think back to the days when I was a practitioner and the days when I was just a homeopath before I was into research. And I remember the patients I helped. And I remember them thanking me and saying, "You have changed my life." You can't leave it, you can't stop, because I am terrified that this medicine might get taken away from people who need it, and that's enough to keep you in the job.
The Water Research Lab is really a long-term vision of mine more than 14 years ago, when I started to really think about what was required for us to really make a difference in this field. The idea of setting up the lab in Germany came from trial and error. England is a no-go, is so against homeopathy, you cannot even mention a word without people starting to scream at you or insulting you. I tried in France for 2 years, And there, the scientists will just go completely mute as soon as you mention the word homeopathy, and that's it. The Germans are very pragmatic, so there has this Germanic streak that says, I don't agree with you, Alex. Homeopathy cannot work, it does not work. And then we talk for 5 minutes, and I say, well, maybe you're right, but I want to find out, I want to do the research. And we argue for a bit, and then at the end of the conversation, the Germans will say, okay, you want to do research? I will support you. How can I help you?
It's a huge moment for us, actually, for Alex and myself. It's been a shared dream for many, many years, and to finally see it happening is almost a little surreal, actually, but hugely exciting.
Now we're getting into the inner sanctum, the actual lab space.
The Water Research Lab is a 5-year research program. It's a chance to create a research program from scratch to answer that specific question: how do homeopathic medicines work?
She's doing an experiment where she's added a number of drops of homeopathic preparation into a water sample. So she can add 1, 2, or 3 drops so that she gets a dose effect.
How is information trapped in the water that ends up being dropped on the pills that people then take?
Homeopathy is bewildering. Many people say, look, there's nothing in the water, it's just water. So when people say there's nothing, indeed there's no chemical difference, but there is a difference in the structures, in the information in the structures carried by the water. Our hypothesis at the Water Research Lab is that water is able to form structures. And the theoretical underpinning for this is quantum coherence domain. And the idea here is that water molecules, about 1 million of them, would be able to come into a form of oscillation, a resonance, that would be stabilized by a quantum effect. These structures would be stable enough to survive over time and to carry the information all the way to the patient. That's the idea of these water structures. There are a number of theories being looked at around the world. There is nanoparticles and nanobubbles. At this point, at the Water Research Lab, we're really looking at the quantum coherence domain. We believe the most promising avenue of research. Hi, Stefan. Rachel's here.
Rachel's here.
For ages. Hello.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi
Good
there.
to see you.
Everybody's
Oh, it's
here.
been far too long. Far too long.
I just have to collect my thoughts. We definitely need some advances regarding the question of the physico-chemical mode of action of homeopathic potentization.
Yeah, that's the end goal, of course, yeah.
The
Right.
questions or the problems, the scientific problems that are involved around homeopathic potentization, they are so profound that if there is anything real about homeopathic potentization, then it would mean that we would really discover something completely new in science.
Yep. Any discovery in this field will have huge ramifications, great spin-offs in different areas that we can't even imagine right now. So for me as a scientist, it is what I mean by research, by science, by going into the unknown, digging out something. If there's nothing, we'll know. If there's something that is there, well, it'll be amazing. It'll be really interesting for everybody to know what we've discovered. Yeah.
In order to have the Australian report challenged, we needed to go to an authority that had the power to challenge another government department, and that was the Ombudsman.
Jerry contacted HRI back in February 2016 and asked us if we would be willing to co-author this complaint. Jerry was lead author on half of the complaint, which dealt with issues of breach of procedure, conflict of interest and bias. And then HRI was brought in to do the full scientific critique of the report.
Oh, good. This is great. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, can I without thinking about it, gut feeling, when will we finish this, do you think?
I mean, the effort that we had to put into investigating this review, both at my end and also with Rachel and Alex at their end, looking at the scientific aspects, I mean, it's been a massive effort.
We had to show not just that scientific procedures had been breached, scientific methodology was abnormal, we had to actually show that the public had been misled because the way that they reviewed the evidence was so inappropriately done that it distorted the results.
It's about the ability of the public to be able to trust in their institutions and that government's not lying to them.
Jerry contacted me and raised significant concerns around the integrity of the report and asked me to have a look at it both from a scientific and a legal perspective and to provide him with an opinion as to whether there were some legal avenues to address some of the findings in the review.
Yeah.
To go to the point of engineering a protocol to actually eliminate as many studies as you could is, to me, is quite telling.
That's extraordinary.
It's not against the law to put out a bad review as long as that review was conducted properly. And what was particularly concerning about this review was that to the general member of the public, they wouldn't understand whether the methodology was appropriate or not. You have to have a scientific background to understand that there were serious issues with the methodology. So out of the blue comes this post hoc protocol. And after quite considerable legal review and advice from senior barristers, the approach we decided to take was to lodge a complaint with our Ombudsman.
We put together a lot of material. We were very comprehensive with that complaint, so the submission itself is over 300 pages. The Ombudsman complaint and the Ombudsman's determination, it doesn't just impact here in Australia, it's an international question actually, it's an international issue.
Ombudsman processes do take a long time, especially with this review because the volume of material that was created for the Ombudsman to look at was quite extensive. If the homeopathy review had been conducted properly, I would have had no issues with the findings, whether they were good or bad. The issue here is that there is evidence that the methodology was manipulated to achieve a predetermined outcome. That's what I have a problem with. I don't know whether homeopathic medicines show efficacy or safety at all. But what I can tell you categorically is that this review doesn't answer that question for me because there are significant issues with the scientific methodology. The bigger issue for me is the impact around consumer choice. What the ramifications of this review are for the ability of a consumer to decide whether they want to use homeopathic medicines or use any other treatment. Because there is some discussion about pharmacies removing homeopathic medicines from their shelves if there's negative findings. And so as a consumer, what happens if I want to use a homeopathic medicine?
I think we treated the Ombudsman like the Wizard of Oz. We're just going to turn up to the wizard and he's going to go, that's terrible, that report must be overturned. And what we've actually learnt is, like in the Wizard of Oz, we've had to find our voice, we've had to find our own strengths and generate that process from within. It's been quite a rewarding process to be part of as well because it's actually galvanised a social movement and brought a lot of people together.
pareció el documental? Bien, ¿verdad? Se ve lo que se cuece alrededor del negocio de la homeopatía, ¿no? Bueno, pues nada, mañana, si tenéis alguna pregunta sobre el documental que se os ocurra, la podemos ver mañana en algún ratillo, ¿eh?